I want to talk into the microscope.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the Voice of Wisdom. With over 60 years of experience as an investment banker, entrepreneur, investment analyst, economist, and venture capitalist, Morty Davis is Wall Street and capitalism personified. The over 400 companies for which he has raised more than $3 billion over the years have created a countless number of jobs and exciting new products. Through the Voice of Wisdom, Mr. Davis explores, analyzes, and debates the most topical, political, economic, and social issues facing our world today. Joining Mr. Davis today for a discussion on the hand of government is Len Carter. Len is an investment banker, business consultant, and private investor. And now, Mr. Davis and Mr. Carter.
Hello again. Welcome back. It must be Wednesday evening, 6:30, because that's when this podcast, Morty Davis, the Voice of Wisdom, surfaces. And I have the privilege of joining you in this podcast, joining you especially because it's your participation that really inspires me and makes it a much more interesting, better program. And also, I'm delighted to have Len Carter back again. He's a genius that I welcome back. He graduated as an engineer from Cornell University. Then he got a graduate degree in engineering at Stanford. And finally, he graduated from the same school that I did, Harvard. These days, I'm reluctant to admit that I went to Harvard because their student body turned out to be, and the faculty and the leadership has tolerated such terrible behavior. But anyway, when I went and when he went, we didn't have this kind of experience. At least we weren't aware of the anti-Semitism and the misinformation that was spread about Jews in Israel. But he's a genius, and it's a privilege and a pleasure for me to have him on a program, even though he's so bright that when he disagrees with me, I have to back down. Actually, when he disagrees with me, I learn a lot more. So you get wisdom more from criticism and commentary about what you present than just doing a monologue and have everybody agree with you. So thank you, Len, for joining me. Before I get into the nitty-gritty of the week's discussion, which we sent you earlier today, I feel it incumbent upon me, because I care so much about you all, to make sure that I can figure out ways in short messages to make you happier. That's why I wrote this book. It took me years, a collection of wisdom from many, many sources, the Bible, great writers, Dale Carnegie, Bishop Sheen, so many people that wrote brilliantly about how to achieve happiness, all of the prophets and scholars of history. So I like to start off by, in a short, not monologue, but a short paragraph to give you some of the wisdom of my book, Happiness Guaranteed or Your Misery Back. How to be, at the bottom it says how to be happy no matter what. And that's what I want you to learn, to be happy no matter what. Because you have to believe me, and come to inculcate this feeling that happiness is attitudinal. If you got the right attitude, it's not what happens to you, it's how you respond to what happens to you. For example, the Chinese have the same word for adversity and opportunity. They feel every adversity indicates some opportunity. If you correct the adversity, it means you're solving a problem for yourself, and usually the problems you face are the same problems the rest of humanity faces. So just develop the right attitude. Insist that you're going to respond to anything that happens to you in a constructive, positive way. We all go through very tough times, even unbelievably painful tragedies in our lives, disappointments, failures, all kinds of things. But one person comes out of it and is still smiling and still making progress and is successful, and others go into what's the word, a limp,
Funk.
a funk. They go into a funk. It's the F word.
Yeah.
They go into a funk and they become hopeless and worthless. So it's up to you to make up your mind that you're going to control your feelings and your emotions and move on and overcome even the worst, because there's no alternative. Either you give up and throw in the towel and live with this funk for the rest of your life and never succeed and never have fun again, or rarely have fun. So please, please remember, it's attitudinal. Develop the attitude that whatever happens to me, I'm going to figure out how to turn this into a positive, or at least know that it's temporary, very temporary, and good things are going to happen in the future. And I'm going to work to make it happen in the future. So that's one way to overcome the funk, to be active, to be attitudinally active. And that makes all the difference in the world. Anyway, God bless you. I hope you can adopt some of this wisdom. And if you need more, I promise you, if you buy this, get a copy of this book, buy it, or get a friend to gift it to you, or whatever. It'll change your life. I know that because I've had so many calls from people who bought the book or received it as a gift. There's one chief executive president of a Fortune 100 company who said it's the most popular gift. He sends out thousands of gifts every year to all his contacts and all his associates and Christmas time. And rarely does he get more than a thank you, or even in most cases, never gets a call back. People assume that they're entitled to it. But he tells me in this case, people are thanking him and they're using it throughout the year. So I'm so sure you'll enjoy it and benefit from it, that there's nobody's going to give you this kind of offer. A lot of offers you get on TV today are phenomenal. They say, if you don't like it, send back the empty bottle or keep the drug or whatever, and just tell me you're unhappy with it, and I'll send you back the money you paid. I'll do better than that. If you really honestly don't find this a great help to improve the quality of your life, your happiness, your what's the word? your relaxation, your your just your contentment with life, and also your optimism and your energy to do more good things. I will send you back not only the, you don't have to send me back the book even. If you tell me I trust you. If you tell me you didn't get anything out of it or you didn't enjoy it or you find it, even though it's 365 pages with 1 page of wisdom and humor for every day of the year, I will send you back not only what you paid for it, if you send me a copy of your receipt, purchase receipt, I'll send you back double what you paid for it. I don't know how you could have a better deal. Thank God that offer that I've made so far, nobody's taken me up on it. But if a bunch of you suddenly did, I could go broke quickly. So I'm so sure that you're going to like it, that you're going to praise me for it, and better than praise me, that you're going to feel uplifted, and no matter what happens, you're going to be happy. That's the key. So it's attitudinal. Remember that. Change your attitude, and you will be happy. Make up your mind. You're going to be happy. You're in control. Nobody else can control your happiness unless you let them. But you're with yourself 24/7. So you have the opportunity to control your thinking, your mindset, whatever. Anyway, enough of happiness. Now we could go to the misery part. So, Len, what's the misery we want to talk
So,
about? When we talk about government,
yes,
Or-
that's
or-
automatic misery.
or
We've talked a lot about the role of government in many different
or regulation, that
right
people
in many
represent.
almost every topic or theme that we talk about, like regulation, like mandates or things. There's always the question: what should our government, do or not do? We like to say we have a democracy where the people have freedoms, but as we see in lots of examples, sometimes too much freedom can cause problems, whether it's in the environment or in the regulation of financial markets. When things get too unregulated, that can be bad, and when things get too overregulated, that can also be bad. So the ideal role and hand the government has in our lives is a difficult balance that has been subject of discussion for forever and will be a discussion forever, which will keep, I guess, this podcast in business, fortunately, because it's never going to be
That's right.
resolved as much as we would like to think we can be resolved, because there's always going to be people who think the government should do more and other people who think it should do less.
Some Christians have found a formula that works for them by saying, what would Jesus do? And Orthodox Jews likewise say, if God did this to me, put this upon me, then it must be right. And in the end, it's going to turn out to be terrific. And if you believe that, that helps you overcome and move ahead. It's just like if somebody came from Mars and stopped at a surgical room at a hospital and saw somebody, a bunch of people around the patient laying on a bed, and a few of them having knives or swords to cut bone or whatever, they'd go back and report what a cruel world, what a cruel people the human race is. And they don't realize that what is being performed there in that room by those people is to improve the life or lives of other people. So It's the same with if you have the right attitude towards what's happening to you.
I've
You
even
look at it, everything as a blessing in disguise often. But
I've even heard, some Republicans these days asking, what would Reagan do?
what would
Because
Reagan
he's
do?
their
And a lot of them
leader.
say it's great what Trump does.
So with this, with that in mind, these days, in the last week or so, there's been a lot of, a couple of big examples of that debate coming to light again. So the one that we want to talk about was last week, the Alabama Supreme Court ruled that embryos, whether they're within or out of a uterus, are children and would be protected under Alabama's Wrongful Death of a Minor Act. So the decision could also mean people are unable to discard embryos if they no longer wish to use them, requiring them to be stored into perpetuity. So, I mean, it raises the question right off the bat, what do you do with unused embryos? And what happens if one or both of the parents die? So very, very frequently in IVF, where embryos are created in a petri dish or other in vitro environment, more than one embryo is created, and sometimes extras are, not all of them are used, so there's extras. What happens to those? Under this law, it's not quite clear, or it might be clear that if they're discarded, that's wrongful death. And if they're not discarded, then they have to somehow be preserved so that they don't be destroyed, because if they're destroyed, then that constitutes wrongful death. So will parents be required in Alabama to store unused embryos into perpetuity? And if the parents will outlive their embryos, because people don't live forever, but a frozen embryo could stay frozen for longer than people can live. What happens to the embryo at that point? Does the state have to pay? Who pays for the preservation of the embryo at that point?
Len, I have to confess.
So
I have to confess to you.
So I hope you have the answers to all those, because I don't.
No, even though I've had a number of children myself, I've had many, many grandchildren, and I've been there present even at their birth and at their circumcisions and at their post-birth development. Being a man, I took some biology, but I never took laboratory biology. So even till this day, I don't know what an embryo looks like. Is it like a little developing doll, or is it? If I ran across an embryo, I wouldn't know what it is.
Well,
maybe you know.
It depends on at what point in the development of a baby you would look at that embryo. I mean, at the instant,
if it's 4 years old,
that's right.
It's not a.
So
not an
at
embryo.
9 months, you know what it looks like. It looks like a baby.
Oh, is it? It's still called an embryo?
No, it's not called an embryo, but that's what.
No, but so we're
So
talking about is
an embryo. I mean, I think the medical definition is somewhere between the instant of conception. The instant of conception, it's an embryo. Then at some point, at the instance of conception, it's a cell, and then it divides and becomes 2 and 4 and 8 and 6 and becomes becomes a fetus, which is, the term they use for a developing baby. I'm not sure exactly at what point in time from conception. We know conception to birth is 9 months. So somewhere between conception and 9 months, the medical terms change from embryo to fetus to, I don't know what it's called.
I assume, or I take it.
So that's the whole issue, really, of
I
even.
assume, or I take it, that you're a man too. And I don't know if, unlike me, maybe you did have experience with embryos. But have you ever seen an embryo, that what they're talking about in Alabama?
Well,
would you know it?
It would look like a cell,
a
cell or a group of cells. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily. It wouldn't have any. It doesn't have a heartbeat. It doesn't have a.
Does it look human?
No, and that's it's not until several weeks after conception that a heart forms and starts to beat. That's why there are these, like in Florida, they came. When do you begin to prohibit abortion? And in Florida, they have these heartbeat laws that say as soon as you can detect a heartbeat, then that's considered viable, or that's considered not permitted to end that abortion. But prior to that, before there's a heart that forms, all the organs in the human form out of the original, cells that the mother and father put together. Mm-hmm. So at the instant of conception, an embryo just looks like a cell, and then it divides into 2 cells and 4 cells and 8, and then so it would just look like a blob of cells for some period of time before it starts to form a heart and a head and of limbs and everything.
Until after they get out of high school.
Correct. So what the court says is that even that embryo.
What did Alabama say?
The embryo is a baby, even though
it's just a cell that
correct,
doesn't look like that.
Correct. And if you took it out, it couldn't live, and it needs to be.
Does it have a heartbeat?
No. And so, but that goes to the whole debate of when does life begin, at conception or sometime after conception. So if you believe that that life begins at conception, then the Supreme Court in Alabama says, well, if that's the case, which they believe it is, then an embryo, even if it's just 1 cell before it divides into 2, is a child, and therefore can't be killed. So it's not until the embryos are then implanted into a uterus, and then they grow in the uterus to become a baby. They can't grow unless they're in a uterus, so they're not viable as a baby.
Alabama says you can't dispose of it, or you can't even take it out of your system.
Well,
and destroy it.
It's right. In an IVF, in vitro, the woman's eggs are harvested from her, and it's fertilized with the father in a test tube, in a dish. And so that process creates the embryo.
It's fertilized with the father. The father doesn't have to be involved at all.
Well, he doesn't. Well, he does, because you need the other half of the DNA, which comes from his sperm.
That's just to create the embryo.
Correct, initially. But that's his involvement. It's still the father.
After that, he doesn't have to be involved.
No,
right.
But the embryo can't become an embryo without both parts from mother and father. Right. As soon as that's created, which is done in IVF, it's done outside the body, and because they don't have, when in a typical pregnancy, 1 egg is released every period, and that's fertilized and grows into one baby. Sometimes two are released and you have twins. In the case of IVF, they take they fertilize the eggs outside of the body and then put it back into the uterus, and hopefully it grows into a baby. Oftentimes, it doesn't work, and they have to repeat it again and again, another cycle. And what they sometimes do is they put a few embryos in, because if you put in a handful of them, some of them may take, and then your chances of having a viable pregnancy go up.
So why is this action or this legislation
So now when
by Alabama becomes so controversial?
Because if the destruction of an embryo is wrongful death, then
if you're indeed
a
destroying
clinic,
the child.
right? Then an IVF clinic. See what in other states, if they fertilize 10 embryos and implant, say, 5 of them, what do you do with the other 5? They may freeze them until the woman becomes pregnant or gives up or whatever. But then, what do you do with the 5 that were frozen? Normally, they discard them.
You send them to pre-kindergarten.
Right. But if what Alabama says is you can't discard them now, because if you do, that's wrongful death. So in Alabama, if you're an IVF clinic, you're not going to do IVF anymore, because now you're going to be liable. In fact, that's where this case stemmed from, is I think a couple sued an IVF clinic because they mishandled or disposed or did something with the embryo, and it disappeared or was destroyed or something. So the court said that's wrongful death. Why? Because embryos are children. So now if you're an IVF clinic, what do? You're like, not for me, right? You're going to say, I don't want to be involved in this because I'm going to be subject to huge liability, litigation. It's just, so, and that's what you've seen happening, is many IVF clinics now are stopping the procedure because they're afraid of what's going to happen. And even though the Attorney General in Alabama says, well, we're not going to prosecute people for disposing of embryos, it's not codified in any law. So
the law they passed that doesn't have a punishment attached to it?
No, it just says I don't think so. It just says it's wrongful death.
Not by the mother and not by the doctor.
I think it would be wrongful death if even the parents did it.
I'm saying.
But there's no punishment attached. Whatever the laws are for wrongful death, I suppose. But more importantly,
well, maybe manslaughter.
Right.
Is it punishable?
Yeah, I mean whether they, it's a lot of it's not clear how the court would react, and even though the Attorney General is saying we're not going to prosecute people for this, it's not in a law. It's just in the court. So you can imagine IVF clinics are nervous. They don't want to do this. So that puts, so the big news headlines were, how do the Republicans and other people who are pro-life yet pro-family, how do they react? How do they react to this? And it's kind of twisted them into pretzels, because on one hand, the Republicans, for the most part, is claimed to be pro-life and not fans of any kind of abortion or limited abortion, and they're pro-family. So how do you support the Alabama ruling? And in fact, there was an interview. I forgot it was some reporter interviewing Senator Tuberville from Alabama, the senator from that state, asking him what he thinks of the ruling. And his first reaction on camera was, absolutely, I support it. And the reporter, and then he said, well, because, you know, we're the party of family and we want couples to be able to have more blessed children. And the reporter asked, well, if that's the case, then how do you support the fact that IVF clinics are not doing IVF anymore because of this ruling? Doesn't that hurt your philosophy of, go against your philosophy of doing things to make families have it easier to have babies? Which it does, right? I mean, if the ruling is going to cause fewer IVFs, then or make it more difficult or confusing to have IVF as a way of having children, then that does kind of fly in the face of what the Republicans are for in terms of pro-family. So Tuberville's response was kind of, he didn't know what to respond, and he said, well, that's another topic for another day, and we'll have to talk about it later.
A lot of the criticism.
So they're really twisted into pretzels on this one, because they can't, it's very hard to support the legislation, but also say you support families and
No, a lot of the criticism, and in my view, justifiable criticism of the Republican position that we care so much about life, about bringing the baby into the world, and not cutting off its entire future. So they care about forcing the mother to have the baby, even though she may not be in a position to take care of it, or the baby is so already damaged. And but anyway, the criticism that many people have is, yeah, the Republicans are great, they care about life until the baby's born and not out. And then if it doesn't have any food, or it's born into a family of terrible poverty, or whatever, or the mother is on drugs, and they still force her to have the baby, or she was raped and she can't even deal with it, and they still have. So they care about saving the baby, but not seeing that it has a life. It's one thing to keep it alive, but some of them are brought in and given birth to by parents that are going to subject that infant, that embryo, to the worst conditions, and so you sort of wonder, are they really so warm-hearted and so concerned that they put themselves out to see that every baby that's born has at least some kind of decent start in life?
yeah, I mean, the supporting life doesn't end when at birth. Supporting life extends through life, through the whole life, you would think. So, naturally, both sides, are jumping on this. The Democrats, particularly as it relates to the 2024 race, it's a field day for Democrats, because now they come out and say, you see, once again, what happens when you have a conservative court, and this never would have happened if 3 conservative justices weren't appointed by our last president. And look at how your rights, freedoms. What about people's freedoms? Here you have the government taking away your freedoms, not letting you do IVF because of the legal ramifications of
I
that.
think it's going to influenced lots of women once again, and Republicans are helping the Democrats by introducing this kind of legislation. But I don't think it reaches the same level as when they canceled or overthrew Roe Wade, because that was almost a universal problem for all women, even the ones that are pro-life, that you can't ever have an abortion if you're raped, if you're going to die, you know. So I don't know if it's going to have quite the same impact.
I think it's more of a political, storyline.
Yeah, and
where
aren't as aware,
because they can make it an issue, and in fact, like Trump came out the other day and said that he is a big supporter of IVF, and because he wants people to be able to have families and, as he said, beautiful babies. So that's nice, but he left the issue of this ruling aside, just didn't talk about it, because it's very easy to say, I support IVF, but how do you support IVF if this ruling severely restricts it? And that's where, it's we'll just ignore that issue.
as long as he doesn't support Ivy colleges and Ivy League universities.
So I think that's so. The Democrats are happy that they have another, way to attack conservative Republicans on their rights being taken away, on their reproductive freedoms being taken away, on their ability to create families being taken away. And the Republicans are having a hard time trying to thread the needle, right? Thread the needle as to how you can be supportive of IVF, pro-life, and maybe supportive or not supportive of this ruling. So we won't talk about it. So an interesting thing. The
We're
other,
going to find out in about 9 months. When is the election? 9 months? Less, maybe. Or in March now.
Yep. Like that's early November,
March
so
is the
we have about 8 months.
third month. January, February, March. And October is the 10th month. So 7 months.
March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, 8 months.
8 months.
Yep, just 1 month shy of an embryo turning into a baby. So the hand of government on
another
question.
controversial
Yes.
issue.
So we'll see. I'm sure that it's going to be a topic of debate, a topic of mud throwing, a topic of even on the down tickets. The overturning of Roe versus Wade, even to moderates, that is something that just made the decision revert to the states. Like Nikki Haley, when you ask her about abortion, her response is always the same thing: is look, every state is going to be different. What works in New York is not going to work in Mississippi or Texas. And so this allows the states to reflect what their populations want. It's a states' rights kind of thing. It's not, they're not going, and she says, while she doesn't really talk about whether she would support a national ban on a congressional or legislative ban, but she says it's not possible. So it'll never be possible to get, something like that passed through the Congress. And she's probably right. So
get something like what?
a federal ban, as opposed to letting this, right now, the states can do what they want in terms of setting limits and, abortion rules and
But
regulations.
we don't need all the states. If we say it's a federal decision,
Correct. So,
as it was for 50
Right.
years,
right.
railroad was on the
Right.
books for 50
But
years.
but conservatives say,
all the
why
states
shouldn't we
for
let the
years.
states, if you have a very conservative state who doesn't want abortion, why should they not have what they want? And the liberal state can have abortion. I mean, doesn't that reflect the will of the people better than the government saying everybody has to do this or everyone has to do
No,
that?
I don't think. Often it takes the power of the federal government. For example, if some states said, we don't believe we should have red lights and green lights and so forth, and stop signs, people should have, just like DeSantis said, people should make up their mind if they want to take the COVID, the vaccination, even though it's not only their own lives that's affected. So the federal government presumably is going to act on behalf of all of the people, not, well, you got to give the people the freedom. Freedom is only worthwhile if it comes with limitations. And so I don't see how the federal government couldn't impose a universal law throughout all the states.
Well, they could, and they could.
And they should.
But
In my judgment, they should. How about if one state suddenly allowed somebody wants to marry his
well,
dog?
if it didn't affect other people in other
It
states,
doesn't affect if he wants to marry his dog.
and everyone in the state voted for that referendum,
Nobody voted. He just does it. Nobody votes against it.
but that's what happened.
Nobody votes against it.
No, but in the states where there are where abortion rules are determined by the state, and you saw this happening, they put it to a referendum, and in many states it went against conservative
Not every
states.
state put it.
Not yet, no. But the ones that did, I think all or most of them, even though they were conservative states, wound up supporting that. Right, Kansas was right. So, but suppose the referendum was the other way. Then if most people don't want a certain regulation in their state, why wouldn't that be an okay thing to do?
I don't think we have to accommodate every state's wishes or every person's wishes. There are some.
I think the problem is that it starts to affect other states. That's the problem.
Regulations that override the individual desires. Number one, the desires of individuals, and then after that, the desires of individual states. Because I could make a good case to eliminate traffic lights. I drive.
So if everyone in a state voted, should we have traffic lights in the state of
and they did
whatever?
a referendum, and I said,
And everyone
No.
said no traffic lights.
I think that has to be imposed. Because it's people from other states are driving through your state.
That's the problem.
Yeah,
And you can't limit the effect
right.
to one particular state. If you could, then I'd say, no, why not?
Well,
But if you can't, which you can't, it's just not how a United States of America works, because it's states. You can't do that.
You'd have to give me the specific legislation you're talking about.
Well, I think, I don't know if there is any. That's the point, because what legislation does not affect other states?
Like DeSantis said, people should have a right.
Right, but that
Not to
affects
be
other states
vaccinated.
because people travel from one state
No,
to
not
another.
other
So,
states, people with his own state.
right,
When you decide not to have the vaccination, and you're walking around maybe carrying it.
but if everyone in Florida voted to have a choice of having a vaccine, then if they get infected, they voted for that. That's their choice.
But if everybody,
But
how about if
when they
everybody
go outside the state and it starts,
how about if everybody in the state voted not to have a vaccination?
then
I don't think that.
then they know what they're getting.
No, they know what they're getting, but they affect the rest of the country.
The country, right, not
Other
the state,
people,
because
so
you
you
can't
can't-
put borders around the state.
No,
That's why it
and
doesn't
also,
work.
They never get everybody, and they're still jeopardizing their neighbor. Look,
But if the neighbor's okay with it,
what
the
if
problem is it's other people from other states. That's what you can't do.
Everybody in the state voted, and it could happen. Everybody in the state voted against having their kids subject to a draft to the army.
But that's not a state issue. That's a country
What do you mean?
issue.
But
It's
the
country.
The state
No, but it
said,
doesn't affect, it affects other people in other states. That's the problem.
well, it always affects.
That's why these don't work. That's right. So,
I'm saying the federal government has an obligation overall. Individual states have less of an obligation for everybody.
so speaking of the great state of Florida, another hand of government issue is in the news from Florida, which is that last week the Florida legislature passed a legislation that would require social media networks to both prevent people under 16 from signing up for accounts and terminate accounts that a platform knew or believed belonged to underage users. So if you want a Facebook account in Florida, you have to be 16. And if you are less than 16 and have a Facebook account, bye-bye. So it would apply to Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, that kind of stuff.
This is a hard one for me.
So the conservatives say it's good because it relieves peer pressure that students can have, because some have social media accounts, some don't, and if you're a parent who doesn't believe in that, it creates problems for your student because other kids might. And just all the bad things that can be, fettered from social media these days. So DeSantis hasn't said, it's on his desk or will be on his desk. He hasn't said if he's going to sign that legislation, because I think normally he's conservative on stuff like that, but he's also, likes parents to be able to make their own decisions. And just because, why do you need a rule? Why do you need a law to say you can't have a TikTok account? A parent should be able to say you can't have a TikTok account. Whether it's, maybe for some parents, it's 17, not 16. So, there's the leave it up to the parent issue that, so it's a difficult issue because, it balances the question of parent rights to government interference in, Florida's big on the school districts deciding on what should be taught or not taught, in the same way that parents should decide whether to have social media. So, I guess, I don't know, should DeSantis sign something like that?
I wrestle with that one because in many respects, I don't like all the stuff that appears to be available on social media, to be available for young kids.
Some of
For older kids.
some of it's wrong. Some of it's misinformation.
Yeah.
Some of it's just hate speech.
Right.
You know, which may not be factually correct or incorrect, but just
Yeah,
wrong. Just not
pedophile.
this
Parents should have
pornography.
Some control, right? So I have a hard time with.
So
So I like the idea of parents deciding if they should pay for their kids' social media attachments.
And if they do, then does the social media company have either the right or the obligation to deal with, say, misinformation?
Or does the kid feel deprived when all of his friends have access and your kid doesn't? So it's you want to accommodate your kid and make them happy. But, is there a higher motivation or a higher dictum that causes you to make a decision one way or the other? I wrestle with that one.
It is. It's difficult because even, I don't think it should be legislated. I think it should be up to a parent to decide if the kid should have it or not. If they want to pass a law that says a parent has to make a decision for underage up to 18, look, parents decide health issues and whether or not a minor child doesn't have legal rights that an adult child does. So I don't have a problem with a law that would say TikTok can't open an account for anyone less than 18 without parental consent, just like someone less than 18 can't open a bank account without parental consent, or can't do lots of things without parental.
But there's big arguments about
so
a kid that wants to have a transgender operation, and he's only 6 years old or 8 years old, and some people say, you got to give the kid, if he feels strongly that he's really a boy, and he issued a girl's body or something.
Well, I mean, the question, the question there is, should the child have the ability to make that decision for him or herself, even at an age of a minor? So,
at what age would you allow the
child? Well, I would say 18.
18.
But they say maybe earlier. I mean, 18 is an easy one because that's just legal age. You can't be drafted until you're 18. I mean, you can't. Maybe 21. You can't drink in most states in all states until you're 21. So 18 to 21.
A lot of this is very arbitrary. In a lot of countries, you could get married at 14, or even less. And we have rules that without your parents' consent.
Right, you can't less than 18. Yeah. So I think that I wouldn't have a problem if parents had to consent before 18 for things like social media. The question about, certain sexual orientation modifications for minors where the parents don't consent, that's a much more difficult question. I don't know. That I don't have that. I don't have an answer to. But I think
That's why it's tough to be a parent. You can't always look. When I had 4 daughters, and when they were young, I said, "Look, I can't be out with you day and night. You're obviously in a position to do whatever you want. But I want to tell you, if you want to have a relationship with a boy or a man or something, the best way to do that is in a love affair, a love relationship, when you're a little older, and within that framework, it's less complicated, you're more ready." And so I told him, "I can't stop you, and you're out there and you're going to do, if I tell you you can't, you might be more inclined to do it." And I told him the same with drugs. I can't stop you. If you decide you want to be on drugs, I can't watch you 24/7, but I'm telling you, it's very detrimental to your health, to your total life. And so I could tell them 2 or 3 things that even though I'm not around, I can't watch them. I urge them to wait or to.
and
Advice
you can also model the behavior. I think to me, the real trick of parenting is modeling behaviors.
What does that mean?
Don't do as I say, not as I do doesn't work. If you want to encourage your kids to eat well, then eat well.
Right.
If you want to encourage your kids to exercise,
not to smoke.
don't smoke.
Right.
I think
There are parents
monkey
all the
see,
time,
monkey do.
but the parents all the time that are lecturing their kids.
Do as I say, not as I do.
how
That's what I'm
terrible-
saying.
how terrible
And then they
smoking
smoke.
is, and yeah.
Right. That's why I think, it's the monkey see, monkey do. Kids are, moldable, and they're empty sponges as they grow up. And so what they absorb is what they see to absorb.
Yeah.
And so if you model
should
good
be
behavior,
right.
then there's a
You should
better
be a
chance that
Parents
they'll.
should be a
Right.
role model.
And that goes, so, with parents who don't want their kids to see the garbage on social media, you can limit that, because if they don't have a social media account, then they won't see it, or at least see it less. Maybe they'll see their friends, or maybe they'll sneak one or something, but you can still limit it somewhat. And then, again, modeling the behavior that you want them to have.
How wisely you do it, because often when you make it, when you prohibit it, it becomes more
Right.
something that you want to get. If it's like
Right.
kids in
The fruit from the
junior high
forbidden
school
tree.
or junior high school or less at these schools now, in public schools, are given condoms, and that's to protect them from getting syphilis and getting pregnant. But when a boy wants you to perform some sexual act on him, I'll say, "What do you mean? Why won't you do it? Because it's not right, or whatever." If it wasn't right, they wouldn't give us condoms. So they're giving a stamp of approval. What do you think? They're giving us these things to blow up, fill up with water and blow up or something? So that there's messages that you give without meaning to, inadvertently. And how do you deal with that? Do you stop giving condoms to kids 13
Well,
or 12?
if the argument is they'll do it anyway, so it's better to have, it's the same as the drug argument. If people are going to get, bad drugs, you might as well, but they're going to get it no matter what. And if you can regulate it, tax it, and control it better, isn't that better than they're going to do it anyway? So it really comes down to, will they do it anyway, or will the message, as you say, affect whether they do it or not? And I think that's, again, mostly back to the parenting and that role modeling. So, but anyway, so that's our discussion for today. We're about out of time, but what the government should do is not a 1 hour solution, as we've learned in the last hour.
Life is not easy. It's full of
one thing we've learned in the last hour is that it's not solvable in an hour.
Right. It's not solvable even in a lifetime. People complain that kids didn't turn out to be religious enough or something. And I said, well, suddenly you're complaining about that when all these years you didn't behave in a way that enticed them to want to be, All of a sudden you're concerned. Like some woman asked me at a hotel, how come your kids are so compliant, they're so religious, And I said, look, because I don't insist on it, because I said you could be less so, But if you force them, and they don't behave in a way that makes it exciting for them and interesting for them, and a lovable action, you can't complain. So that's the hard part of being a parent. You got to be a role model in addition to everything. Even though you wouldn't want to. There's parents that have swinging relationships. They'll go out and they'll have multiple partners, and both of them agree that it's acceptable to them. But then you can't preach to your kids to be monogamous and to be, it's tough. Being a human being is tough.
That it is, and trying to fix the problems of human beings is even tougher, as we know from the show. So anyway, we've got a lot coming up in the next few weeks. More primaries. We got a State of the Union coming up, which we'll have lots to discuss. And
we had today. We didn't discuss it, but Biden called an emergency meeting at the White House with the Congress, particularly Republican Congress, to try to get
Ukraine aid. Yep.
Avoid the government shutting down without money. And it runs out Friday, and then they had a second date. I don't know. Johnson, the Speaker of the House, felt they should have 2 dates. So it's even doubtful if they could get it done in time, because they say they need 3 days to read it and so forth. And they still haven't agreed, even though it was overwhelmingly passed in the Senate, but the Speaker hasn't brought it up in the House because Trump is against
what, aid to Ukraine?
approving the immigration.
Yeah, well, that's
because he doesn't want it.
Yeah.
He wants to still criticize Biden for stopping, for allowing this, stopping the.
Yep. And the same thing with Ukraine aid. That's it would if it the bill for the aid to Ukraine would pass the House and Senate if the Speaker brings it to the floor, which he has been reluctant to do because Trump doesn't want him to do it.
She or he?
Speaker Johnson.
I thought you said she.
No, the
Johnson.
The bill would pass if he brings it to the floor. It's up to him It's not there's not enough votes. There are enough votes. But if he doesn't bring it to the floor, it can't get voted on. And it's because Trump doesn't want it to. So, unfortunately, for Ukraine.
It's a crazy system. It's the same reason that Obama couldn't appoint a Supreme Court judge, because he still had 9 months. He was what do they call him during that period? Lame duck. A lame duck president. He should wait for the next president to come by, which was like 9 months away, which is unheard of. And subsequently, the same guy, Chris, what's his name? Junior majority leader of the Senate.
Well, it was McConnell at the time. Yeah.
McConnell wouldn't bring it up to the floor for a vote, which is a crazy system. And then with somebody that had 4 weeks to serve still, I think it was Trump that still had 4 weeks to serve, and he approved a vote for it. So, just as we said, it's a tough.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
a tough life.
It is. But at least we can
Have
be
a great
happy.
week, everybody. I love you all, and I pray for you. And most of all, I pray for your good feelings and your happiness and all that entails. Maybe more important than happiness is contentment, appreciation, gratification for what you have, being thankful for all that you have. God bless you. I love you. I look forward to seeing you a week from today. 6:30 next Wednesday. God bless you all, and I hope every day of your life is better than the day before. Bye.